Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Ex Psychic Saved with me, Jen Niza, your friendly former psychic medium. Still friendly. It's true. Trust me. But former psychic medium saved by the amazing grace of our Lord Jesus Christ. My friends, the chosen, a very controversial issue, conversation. There are many people that object to the chosen, and there are people that are die-hard supporters of the chosen. Isaiah 1:18 says, "Come now and let us reason together, saith the Lord." In this video, I will be joined by Pastor Chris Quintana, and we're going to be having a discussion about the chosen, not an attack on anybody, but a good look and a conversation about the objections and what people are saying who defend it. It's very important as Christians, my friends, to have these conversations, to test the spirits, as the Bible says in 1 John 4:1, to know, should we be watching the chosen or should we not be watching the chosen? Is it spiritually dangerous? Join me in this video. Stay tuned for me and Pastor Chris as we're going to dive in to the chosen. Hi, Pastor Chris. Thank you so much for being with me today and having this very important conversation.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and very much looking forward to discussing all of this with you. It's a very, very important topic.
Thank you so much. Just for a little background, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
We're now, my wife and I moved to Texas about 4 years ago. Prior to that, I had been a part of Calvary Chapel in a city called Cypress, California for about 35 years. And it's that same Calvary Chapel, if anybody's seen the movie Jesus Revolution with Chuck Smith, that Calvary Chapel. We're about 20 miles roughly from where that all took place. And we never had planned on leaving, but things are as they are. I didn't come out here to plant a church in Texas. There was already a Calvary Chapel here, which was great. We felt right at home. But I continued doing what I thought was necessary. The most important thing I believe that a pastor can do is teach the Bible book by book, chapter by chapter, verse by verse, the entirety, all 66 books, which was what I did in California. And I do that now online through my YouTube channel, and I put it on the website as well. That's what I do. So through the Bible, Old Testament on Mondays, New Testament on Thursdays.
Fantastic. What is your website? Where can people find you?
Well, the YouTube channel, if they just look up my name and Old Path, theology, it's Old Path Theology. That's also the web address for the website is oldpaththeology.net, but there's a YouTube channel there as well. And so it's my own little part of the world here in Texas doing what I did in California.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So let's dive in. This isn't the first time you would be expressing your concerns about the chosen. So let's dive in and talk about some of the objections that you would have with the chosen. P.S. Spoiler alert, I share the objections, but I'm going to try to be the voice of the one who supports it. So when I hear your objections, Pastor Chris, I'm going to maybe come back and challenge you a little bit with what the defender of the chosen might say.
Right.
Great.
Interestingly enough, I know that this is a little bit off of the subject. Season 1 was almost primarily recorded just a few miles up the road from where I live here in Texas. So there's a little bit of a different connection that I have to it. A friend of mine really loves the program, loves the show, and we went to go walk around the set and look at it. And it's just interesting to realize that this entire project was recorded in the first season very, very close to my home, and it's a very small little set, all things considered. But that just helps you to realize that what you're seeing on the screen is really just it's a different version of what Hollywood does with telling stories. So usually the main objection that I get from most people is, don't you know that there's a lot of Catholics and Mormons involved with it? And Yeah, I understand that, but I don't catch a lot of Catholicism and Mormonism in it. I catch a lot more of what we might consider postmodern Christianity or emergent kind of theology, where it's so trying to emphasize his humanity that it robs him of his deity. And that's been my concern from the very get-go. As soon as I was exposed to this and started to watch some of it, I can't watch it. Friends of mine do. You may have met Shane. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Shane Cox, friend of mine, has watched all of them. And I don't know how he does it. He deserves hazard pay. But I've watched the excerpts of the entirety of a few very, very objectionable parts. And it's really what they end up conveying that is the most distressing. And secondarily to that is the way that Dallas Jenkins reacts whenever somebody is critical. He's not as concerned about trying to win them over to his side. He's become belligerent about it. And of course, there are people on our side of it that probably do the same. But he's not looking to defend it. He's just kind of doubling down on the whole thing and kind of, well, what are you going to do about it type of a thing.
Yeah,
So,
he's gotten. Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry.
no, go
Yeah,
ahead.
he's gotten pretty bold. If I recall correctly, and please don't quote me out there, but in the beginning, he was kind of making these. He was kind of saying, don't substitute reading the Bible for watching The Chosen. But in 2024, on a YouTube posting, he actually states, "I believe it is important to watch The Chosen as though the Bible didn't exist." That's frightening. That's a contradiction of what he has said. And I think that he is now, people are getting so hyped up in the feelings about this. And we're going to get there in a second. But you mentioned something really important. You mentioned that they are robbing Jesus of his deity in, in place of this, of showing his humanity. And one particular way that you and I were talking about it, there is a scene in The Chosen where it's that Jesus has to practice the Sermon on the Mount. I find that extremely upsetting, but like I said, I'm going to be the voice of the supporter. So the voice of the supporter of The Chosen may say exactly what you just said, but that's showing his humanity. He was a man too.
Mhm.
What do you have to say about that?
Sure. And I have no problems with that. Was he very much human? Sure. Look at the time when he was on the Sea of Galilee and they all thought they were going to die and he's asleep on a pillow in the back of the boat.
Mhm.
That's very human. So I don't have a problem with dealing with his humanity. I can find examples of it all throughout the New Testament. I don't have to believe that and do damage to who he is in his essence. So think about this. If I'm watching that episode and the takeaway is, let's just say I'm a person who doesn't really know that much about who Jesus is, other than what I might have been told. And somebody says, well, if you really want to know the authentic Jesus, which they've used that term, then watch The Chosen. You'll see the authentic Jesus. So we get to the Sermon on the Mount in that episode, and there are a few things. Clearly, it's scripted because it had to have been written down and then reviewed by the disciples. And any corrections or any input was welcomed. So what I take away from that is that Jesus is just doing something that's scripted before there were teleprompters, or he would have used one at that time. He's so human that he has to rehearse something that was just done kind of, if I can use the term, organically. It wasn't planned. They just happened to be there. And Jesus spoke to them and really kind of expressed the most eloquent. Even people that are not believers would say, if you just read Matthew chapters 5-7, it's poetic, it's incredible, it's so well crafted as they would see it. We're just saying, no, that's just Jesus speaking contemporaneously to the people who were there.
Mhm.
And he if you look at the substance of what he says, it is mind-blowing, but it didn't have to be scripted. He's the creator of the universe, and he's speaking to his creation as though he had to script that. So I'm offended at the idea that we have to so humanize him as to make him have all the same kind of frailties that we do. And at that point, to the person who doesn't know much about him, you have presented to them a Jesus who doesn't exist.
Wow. And therein lies a huge problem, because if you are looking at a false Jesus, then you can't truly be saved. You're not saved by a false gospel and a false Jesus. But that is another pushback, right? Hey, listen, all right, Chris, come on, so many people are coming to Christ through the chosen. All right, it may not be biblically accurate, of course, but it's bringing people to the Lord Jesus.
Sure. And, I come from a group of churches that focuses heavily on evangelism, which is great. I think that's wonderful. We are not in this, and we're not Christians to make converts. Jesus told us to make disciples. There's a big difference between that. A person gets converted, if you want to use the term, when they come to Jesus and they trust him for their salvation. That's the beginning of it all. But to make them disciples means that you're going to have to introduce them to the genuine Jesus and have them grow in him. So that's where discipleship comes from. And if that means that we're growing in our faith, then if we believe what Paul says in Romans 10, then faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God and not somebody's take on it. So my question would be, well, people are coming to Jesus. Well, okay, I'm curious as to what the number of those people are. And then tell me where they are. Okay, so we're seasons into this. Let's say that people got saved in season 1. I would love if you could just say a number and say 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000 people came to Jesus in season 1. Great. If I could interview all of them right here, right now, I'd love to know what the spiritual condition of them is. And what do they know about the Jesus of the Bible as opposed to the Jesus of the chosen? I'd love to know that. So it's easy to go ahead and make a statement like, well, many people are coming to him. Okay. I have no way of knowing exactly what that number is, but I would love to know the quality of what it is that they know. What's their knowledge based upon? Because I'll say this, I'll go a step further. If they started to check out the Jesus of the scripture with a real critical eye, they will have quit watching the chosen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, 100%. And it's interesting that if Jenkins is saying now it's important to watch The Chosen as though the Bible didn't exist, that presents this issue now with the creative license. Okay, so let's move there next. So a lot of people say, well, what's the big deal? Listen, this is cinematic. There's room for creative license, which you don't particularly take issue with, I think, as according to our conversation in general. But look at the problem there. So if he's saying come and look at The Chosen versus going to the Bible at this point, or as if it doesn't exist, now that creative license, which are things that are not true, they're not facts, they're not true, and they're certainly not biblically accurate, then you're living your life based on that, then you're looking at Jesus that way. There's so many issues with that.
Right. Well, the implication, if you and I just heard that straight out, we would say, so then what you're presenting to me is 100% accurate, and I wouldn't have to check it against the scriptures. So watch The Chosen as though the Bible didn't exist. That means that you would be able to demonstrate to me everything that the Bible would in its accuracy. Clearly, that's not the case. So if I hear him say something like that, then, of course, we want to be able to put it to the test. Now, you and I talked a couple of days ago just so that we would know exactly what we wanted to cover in this. And I had given this example of when Jesus had been addressing a group of people, and he got into a boat, was going to get away separate with the disciples to pour into them. But the people followed him. Now, I've been to Israel a number of times. I've been on the Sea of Galilee. They're leaving from the area of Capernaum, which is on the west coast of the Sea of Galilee, and they're going up into the kind of the northeast corner to a place called Bethsaida. And as he is going there, he ends up seeing them because they've followed him along the coast. Now, those things we know. The Bible narrative tells us about all of that. What it doesn't tell us about was the discussion in the boat. Mm-hmm. So whatever the discussion in the boat is would be creative license. Mm-hmm. So if that creative license could run into all kinds of interesting conversation, so long as there's nothing in it that would be in any way contradictory to the text everywhere else in the Bible, I'm going to be okay with that, though it's probably unnecessary. At least I'm not going to have a problem with it. Mm-hmm. So that's when we start to run into creative license run amok. And so, again, we talked a couple of days ago, the discussion between Jesus and John the Baptist, that's creative license. But the creative license that they took with that is a complete whitewashing of the Jesus of the Bible and the John the Baptist of the Bible. They are both turned into caricatures of what's true. And that frustrates me so much because, again, it elevates John to a place he would never have considered himself to be. And it brings Jesus down to a person who can be rebuked by just a normal human being.
Right. And, our concern really needs to be not only for ourselves, but for the other people that are watching this, for unbelievers that are watching this, right? Why would we want to exchange the truth for a lie? That
Sure.
reminds me of Romans chapter 1, honestly. Why would we want to exchange the truth for a lie? And unfortunately, what we're seeing, Pastor, is even in the body, we're seeing a lot of people kind of saying, yeah, that wasn't, in the Bible, it said so-and-so was sitting, but they have him standing. That's not, it may seem to be a minor detail, but for a fact that that's not what the text says. And now they're just going completely against that. So you're going to be okay with that because of what exactly? Because in some people's minds, it's doing a higher good.
Yeah.
Why would those of us who are in Christ, of course, we want to see souls won. We want to see souls won for Christ. But again, are you willing to exchange the truth of the word of God for that? And that also assumes, kind of like what you were saying before, that we can't save people anyway.
Right.
We can't save people. That's up to God to save people. And we need to entrust the lost to the Lord and do as he commands us to do, of course, share the gospel and make disciples.
Right. Well, if we can make this really, really personal, imagine Dallas Jenkins at 80 years old down the road, if the Lord leaves us here for all that, and somebody decides that they want to do his life story in documentary form. And they start to tell all these stories about Dallas that are absolutely inaccurate and write it off as creative license. Do we think for a moment that Dallas would be okay with just, okay, I never said any of that stuff, and it really kind of portrays me in an inaccurate light, but whatever, it's creative license, I'm okay with it. We all know better than that. Your own ego would say, wait a minute, you're completely misrepresenting me, which is exactly what they're doing with Jesus. And I don't care if people want to argue that. I can show them little clips that they probably never paid attention to. Again, the dialogue with John the Baptist and Jesus it's infuriating. It's even more, to me, it's even more offensive than the Sermon on the Mount, because that's just almost cartoonish. But when you get to the dialogue between Jesus and John the Baptist, it is completely offensive.
This really just seems like man going his own way again. I mean, I just felt so sad when you said that. That was such a great analogy, doing a documentary on Jenkins and misrepresenting him. I can't imagine how sad Jesus must be just to have this sort of thing going on and man going astray. Does this seem to you, because it seems to me, because of how big it is and how big it's getting and all the other things that are coming out of it, just some sort of mass illusion from the enemy, trying to make it kind of look like a revival of sorts, like do you know what I mean?
Sure. To me, it's almost the emperor wears no clothes type of a thing. It's like everybody thinks that it's great. Well, who do you want to be as the contrarian? I don't want to make people mad at me. Yeah, I've watched it. It's great. And you're kind of rolling your eyes, but I just wonder how many people say, gosh, you know what? I can substitute my Bible reading with this. And we know that people do that. We've read in the fan pages of this, on the Facebook pages and all the rest, you see that people talk about Jonathan Rumi, that whenever they're reading the Bible, they're seeing his face when Jesus' name comes up. I don't know if you've read all of those things, but it's just almost cult-like in some people's minds. And I know that really, there are probably people listening to this right now just rolled their eyes as soon as I said that, cult-like. But I defy you to look at some of the people who basically say, I've got the calendar for the chosen on the wall, and whenever I think of Jesus, I think of Jonathan Rumi. Well, I've never met Jonathan. I don't know anything about him. I know theologically he's a nightmare, but I come out of that background as well. So the things that I believed about God and about all the theology of Catholicism, it is a nightmare. I don't know how else to describe it. I was in insane spiritual darkness during that time because I didn't know the genuine Jesus of the Bible. I only knew what I was told. And I didn't even investigate it that far. But I've watched the things that he has said. I know the practices that he is a part of, and I know that it's only darkness. And it's wrapped in his Catholicism. Again, I come from that background, so I know of which I speak. I learned much more about the church after I left it. I didn't know any of the things that I know now when I was a part of it, because you don't ask questions. You do not put any of that stuff under the microscope as a Catholic. You just do what you're told.
I keep thinking, of 2 Corinthians 11:14-15. Satan masquerades as an angel of light, and it's no wonder that his servants would masquerade as servants of righteousness. And it just reminds me, and I would pray it would remind everybody out there, how important it is to test the spirits. And I get it. Like, it can seem like the popular thing. It can get really big, and it could look so Christian. But that's the point. The enemy is a master deceiver. He is a great illusionist, and he tricks Christians all the time.
Sure.
So we have to look at these things and decide whether, obviously, go to God in prayer about the chosen, watching it, supporting it, promoting it, and dig a little bit deeper. That's why I'm trying to, now, Pastor Chris, it looks to me like they've gotten big enough, kind of reined in enough supporters that now you see he's slipping in these, like we mentioned before, Jenkins is slipping in these statements and almost revealing himself in a way. Do you see what I mean? Like almost revealing. But now people are so enamored with this program.
Yeah, and if you think about this, it's probably something that most people haven't really thought about. But if you just watch the reaction of people in season 1, and after season 1 was over, and you could find some of the problems with it, you could ask yourself the question. Just say, let's extrapolate down the road another several seasons. Will it get better, or will it really push the envelope even further down that direction? So where it is currently it's no surprise to me. Because with each season, it gets worse. And I think part of that is Dallas going, oh, yeah, well, I'll show you, kind of a thing. And of course, he's not going to do anything that's just straight up heretical, but he's going to really start to introduce more and more stuff. And I don't know how much he even realizes that he's doing it. It's just probably more done for the intent of, I'm going to show my critics. If that's like, you haven't seen anything yet, or Jesus saying we're just getting started, those kind of silly things that are part of the narrative. I wonder if all of that would be taking place if not for the pushback that he has gotten on this. But it's only from a small portion of what would be the church. And so, yeah, you're looking to marginalize your critics and try to make them the issue rather than addressing their concerns. But that's typical. So just one last thing, because you had mentioned it about the angels of light and appearing to be ministers of him. The devil has never walked into a room and said, I'm Satan and I'm here to ruin your life and destroy you. He would never do it.
Right.
He would want to try to present something to you that goes, yeah, I can see myself doing that. That's entertaining, or it's spiritual, or whatever people like to use. The devil's going to give them a counterfeit that looks good on the outside. And until you actually get all the way into the tall grass of it, you don't realize the danger of it. That's the issue. And frankly, it was kind of the way we started this whole thing. The Jesus and the entire, the whole narrative with the disciples, and really the whole of the story, really presents a Jesus that fits better in a postmodern Christian or a post-Christian kind of a world. And I don't know if we should develop what exactly that means, but it's what the big thing 15 years ago in the church was the emerging Christianity and the emergent Christianity. There were two different camps. Most people use those terms interchangeably. But emergent theology, guys like Brian McLaren and other ones like that, were saying Christianity is more of a universalism kind of a view. God is a God of love, therefore all will be saved. They completely reject what we would consider as orthodoxy. You had the emerging kind where that was the cool, young, hip pastors that would use kind of some coarse language and this, that, and the other thing to make Jesus relatable, but they never actually stripped him of his deity like the emergent people would. I believe what you have is kind of a hybrid of that presented in the Chosen, because you're certainly not going to entertain, if you will, those people who hold to real orthodox views. And I'll consider myself to be one of those. But he's also not to that point of just absolutely crazy where he's completely human and everybody's going to get saved. But people can read into watching the program. It's kind of like a spiritual Rorschach test. And anybody can watch it and go, well, I think this means this. I think that that's how this fits. There's really nothing. There's no guidelines. There's no guardrails in this program. People can take away from it what they will. And there's nothing that is like ironclad that you can say, I can plant my flag in this truth. Mm-hmm. It leaves it open to the interpretation of the watcher. And that, again, what would you and I, if we were saying, let me see if I could concoct a way to completely put the genuine gospel and flip it on its head and corrupt it without making it seem corrupt. This is how we would do it. Present a Jesus that's a little bit off from what we know, take the creative license, do all this kind of thing, make him really folksy, easy to follow, unoffensive, easygoing, doesn't require anything of me, just gets caught up in the typical thing. He's not all that coordinated. He can't play games. He doesn't know his right from his left, if you've watched that clip. Oh, yeah. And so it's like, wait a minute. He's the creator of the universe. He made right and left. If he wanted to play a game, he'd be the best who ever played it. It's just like, this is embarrassing. But again, it presents a Jesus who is, aw shucks. He's just one of us. And
yes.
Again, if we think about it, one of us is pretty much that he gets us program or a campaign that's going on. You see it on the TV all the time. Mm-hmm. Again, let's make him folksy. The Jesus calling, when Sarah Young presented that Jesus, he's so goofed up he doesn't even understand his own theology. So he's much more new agey by saying God is in all things. No, he's not. That's panentheism. That's not biblical Christianity. He's only in those that have been born again. And there's a very specific way that takes place. So once again, the Chosen is just another in a long line of misrepresentations about who Jesus actually is. And it's all done for the reason of trying to present a number of counterfeits, hoping that people get caught up in this version of it or that version of it. But it's all intended to minimize and to marginalize those who hold to orthodox view. And, this is one that you and I had talked about. Let me just go ahead and read it, because it's really one of my very favorite passages. It's in Mark chapter 10, and the context of it is we're talking about the last time that Jesus and the disciples would go to Jerusalem for the holidays, in this case, Passover, because Jesus wasn't coming home from this. He was going, and this was going to be the last time. He was going to give his life. Okay, that's the context. That's where we are in the time. So it's not just another pilgrimage, if you will, for Passover. So in verse 32, we get this. Now they were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. So again, the typical way that we study the Bible is to make observations about this. It's not as though they haven't walked behind their rabbi before. It's not as though they've gone to Jerusalem before. This is all very familiar to them. There's one thing that's very different. It says that they are amazed. So something is different about this particular trek, and they're recognizing it. So it goes on to say this, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. Once again, afraid why? What's different about this time? So clearly, in discussions that are probably there, again, we don't take creative license, but we have to ask some questions. What's different about Jesus this time? Is it just his demeanor? Is it the way he looks? Is it his attitude of things? Is there an earnestness that's even different than he's usually giving off? Or has he said something? Whatever the case is, they've picked up on it. So they're amazed, they're troubled. All right? So it says, and they followed him behind, and they were afraid. And then he took the 12 aside again. It's not as though they haven't heard this before, because you can go back and find that Jesus is telling them something he has told them numerous times in what we have recorded. He probably told them a number of times in addition to what we have recorded. So it says, then he took the 12 aside again, and he began to tell them the things that would happen to him. And he says in verse 33, behold, we are going to Jerusalem, The Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes. They will condemn him to death, deliver him to the Gentiles. They will mock him, scourge him, spit upon him, and kill him. And on the third day, he will rise again. Jesus speaking of himself in the third person. This is not the first time that they've heard it, but something about this trip troubled them. Now, Jesus could have just said, would you guys get it together? I'm sick of telling you this story. Instead, he says, my disciples, the people that are closest to me in this whole world, are troubled and they're afraid. Let me pull them aside and go through this again with them. That's incredibly human for him to do that, because he's concerned about them and their well-being spiritually, emotionally. Their well-being is his concern at that point, because he's going to repeat something he's told them repeatedly. And I, as a parent, know how much I hated when my daughter was young to have to say, how many times do I have to tell you this? And it's going to get very, we can get frustrated with that. Here, Jesus gives no frustration. It's like, let's go over this again. I don't want you to be troubled any more than you are, but read his discourse with them starting at chapter 13 of John, all the way through chapter 17, and look at the things that Jesus says to them in the closing hours of his life as a free person. He's not worried about what's happening to him. He's worried about what's going to be happening to them. Wow. And he's preparing them for a world in which he will not be there standing in front of them going forward. That's insanely human. And only John deals with the upper room discourse. And I would tell the viewers of this, start at chapter 13, read through chapter 17, and you will find some of the most often repeated verses that you might not realize Jesus said in the last hours of his life. And it was all about preparing them for the world that they were about to face. He promises them the Holy Spirit in those discourses in ways that you don't find anywhere else. Talks about them being troubled. They're going to deliver you up to be killed. Be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. That's all chapter 16, the vine and the branches. Some of his I ams are found there. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That's chapter 14, verse 6. I'm the vine, you're the branches. That's chapter 15. So those upper room discourses is where he's letting them know, I'm not just someone. I'm not just human. I'm not just that folksy kind of guy. This world's about to become distressing to you, but you need to be prepared for it. And I won't leave you orphaned. I will send the Holy Spirit. Incredibly human. He's concerned about their well-being, not about what's about to happen to him.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's the compassion, right? He doesn't need to practice the Sermon on the Mount to show his humanity. Right. He shows his humanity in amazing ways according to the Bible, which is the Word of God, which is the truth, which is inerrant and sufficient for us. I love to drive home the fact, even just how we're having this conversation, we're just talking, we're reasoning through this, we're testing the spirits, and I would encourage all Christians to do that. Come on. Instead of, again, getting swept up, like this just seems like people are just getting so swept up in this that they're ignoring the Bible, they're ignoring the truth, and they're ignoring even perhaps their responsibility to test it and to be praying about it and use discernment and trading it in for what's popular.
Right.
Do you think that's a fair assessment or no?
Absolutely fair. Because let's just say again, let's assume I know just some rudimentary things about Christianity, but I'm not a Christian. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know that there was this historic person named Jesus. I know that he was killed on a cross. According to what we've been heard, he allegedly arose from the dead. We might know, some of the real biggest of the big picture. And if you watch the Jesus of the Chosen, can you imagine him saying something like this? John chapter 17, again, in that upper room, look at what he says in verse 5. Now, Father, glorify me together with yourself, with the glory which you and I had before the world was, before anything that we know. Now, if you compare that to what God says, the Father's speaking in Isaiah 42 in verses 7 and 8, God says, I am the Lord, that's my name, and I will not share my glory with another. Here Jesus says, we shared it before anything was spoken into existence. That's not the Jesus of the Chosen that I'm seeing. Because him saying something like that, this is like fall on your face, prostrate, trembling, here's the creator of the universe praying for the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
So they're hearing this. This isn't him going away and them falling asleep. They're present for this. They're catching this. And he says an amazing thing that a lot of times gets overlooked. I do not pray for these alone, verse 20, but I also pray for those who will believe through their word, their testimony. And that's you and me right here. That has been fulfilled in our lives. This thing that Jesus prays has been in operation for 2,000 years because we're reading John's gospel here. I just wish that the chosen was more concerned about telling the accurate story than trying to fill in the blanks in between, and really at that point doing more harm than good to the genuine narrative. Once again, you don't need to change the things that are in it, because the actual story, the actual truth of what's in the Bible is so unbelievably compelling that if it's told accurately without any kind of addition, it's amazing. It's beyond description. It's beyond words. It's more than compelling. And we know that because we're living evidence of that. It changed a person who was destined for hell into a person who has glory in their future. That's a story that's worth telling, and I don't have to minimize and make Jesus so, I keep using the word folksy because I can't think of another word. He doesn't, he's just short of flashing peace signs at me and doing the whole hippie Jesus thing. That's the sad part.
That is really sad. Wow. What about the things that have come out of this as well, kind of like the secondary things? So it kind of reminds me of how, when people get hyped up with movies and stuff, and then from the movie, they have merchandise, they have apps, they have things like that. So what about the Hallow app? I know came out of this, which I know that there were meditations and such. I haven't done a deep dive, just in all fairness, because I don't really want any part of it, to be honest with you. But what are your thoughts?
Well, there's the concern that we have as well, because you end up making these people that are portrayed in the program. They have a private life as well, and public as well, obviously. So the merchandise, it's the people that they promote. When a mutual friend of ours, we were talking about this, and they're promoting books by mystics, Brother Lawrence in this case. And so both Dallas and Jonathan Rumi were big fans of a book wherein Brother Lawrence is mentioned. And he's a universalist. He's a pretty scary guy, frankly. And a lot of Christianity thinks he's great. This Brother Lawrence, historical figure from hundreds of years ago. So anyway, that's the problem with it. It's all the collateral things afterwards, because people let their guard down, because they haven't been really discerning about what they're reading and watching in the Chosen, but they really like the characters. And again, you can read the people who watch the show. We love this character. We love this person, and they want to find out more about them. Okay, well, I can start seeing the things that Dallas is saying about Brother Lawrence, and so has Jonathan Rumi. But beyond Jonathan, now there's the Hallow app. And then we know that he's promoting the rosary and a bunch of other things that are very, very Catholic, things that are absolutely unbiblical. The rosary could not be more unbiblical if it tried. And yet, because everybody trusts the Jesus on the screen, Jonathan Rumi, what else is he into? And this is my problem with so much of Christianity when it comes even into worship and stuff like that. People love some of the worship that's happening in the church, but they don't know the theology behind it. Well, this is the same situation. They're caught up in the celebrity of all this, but they're not really discerning about what the celebrities are hawking and peddling.
Right. So the Chosen presents itself as something to win souls for Jesus Christ. So what would Satan's agenda be with the Chosen by presenting this false Christ? What would be the idea of this? Why make it look so good? Why make it look like something to save people?
Right. Well, we have an old saying in just, I guess you could say, kind of American culture, is if you can't beat them, join them. So I wouldn't expect a project like The Chosen to present to me a Jesus who is just overtly, a complete fabrication. I want to try to make him look as authentic as possible, but make him not quite the genuine article. So if you ask some people, who do you believe Jesus is? Well, he was a good man, he was a prophet, he was this, he was that, but they'll never for a moment say he's God in human skin. They wouldn't say he's deity. They were going to find some way to absolutely, strip him of everything entirely as a whole thing. He's just one of many. So, people coming out of the New Age know Jesus as just one of many of these ascended masters and all the words that they like to use. So they're not going to have any problems trying to explain him away as just a human with seemingly extraordinary ability or insight or whatever else. But he's not a savior. He's nothing more than just a human. So the devil would not want to try to do that with the chosen, because the audience is different. These are people who would say they believe in the genuine biblical Christianity, the biblical Jesus. So I don't see them. The chosen does not present him as the perfect representation of what we see in the scripture, but they don't turn him into just the caricature that the New Age might turn him into, or the cults might turn him into, or Islam would turn him into. What they've got to do is create a third way, which would be kind of one that runs on a parallel track. He looks like the Jesus. He fits the narrative of the personal Jesus that we know from the Bible, but characteristically, he's just different in some basic ways. And it's that little bit of difference that really opens the door for all kinds of exploitation by the devil to make him into that down the line a little bit. So again, the things that we've talked about, how they just change him in his essence, rehearsing the Sermon on the Mount, all the different things that you can find. And we've only scratched the surface of the real problems that there are in the way that he's presented. So once again, just to kind of wrap it up, nice little tight bow, there's the Jesus that is completely inauthentic in every conceivable way. He's just a human being with nothing in the way of being God on the earth. There's that one. There is the genuine Jesus of the scripture. You've got to kind of come up with a hybrid, something that makes him a little bit less than who he actually is without actually ever coming out and saying it. And again, people want to say, well, that's not Dallas's intention. I don't care what his intentions are. What's the fruit? That's all that I have to go on. I don't care about what motivations anyone has. None of that stuff matters. What's the finished product, and what do you take away from the finished product, and what might people do with that finished product in formulating their belief? That's my concern. That's the only thing I care about. It's why it's not personal with me.
Right, right. And that's always been Satan's agenda, is to lead people away from the one true Jesus Christ, from our Lord and Savior, and win souls for hell.
Right.
That's what I say. He's the counterfeit. Here we are, right? What are we always doing? Sharing the gospel to in the hopes that souls would be won. Well, the devil is trying to recruit his army, and also trying to win souls in the spiritual battleground to go to hell to share his fate with him. I know that sounds very dire and I sound like the bad guy, but that's the truth, because why else? This is what he does. He wants to lead you away, but he's got to make it look as convincing as possible so that you will be led away from the true gospel, from our true Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and from God's word. Mm-hmm. That's scary. That's scary. Okay, right. Well, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is the whole thing with it's just entertainment. You guys are making it too big of a deal. Fine, then just write something that's fiction. Mm-hmm. Choose a lane here. It's either fiction or it's entertainment. Mm-hmm. But it's you have to just they have to be consistent. If it's just entertainment, great. Let me know that it's just entertainment, and I shouldn't take it in any way as a genuine representation. But they do the opposite. They try to mix the two, though it's oil and water, but they want to try to make you think that it's all compatible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely right. So what would be your final words on this, Pastor Chris? Encouragement for people, warnings? What would be your final words on this?
Sure. Acts 17. Acts 17 is perfect because there's a kind of a spiritual practice that should be taking place. When Paul's talking about that, he talked about the people at Berea, that they were more noble or fair-minded than those at Thessalonica because they heard everything that he said with readiness of heart, but they searched the scriptures to see if those things were so. That should be a practice that we put into our day-to-day lives when it comes to our faith. Whatever is presented to us, does it pass biblical muster? Plain and simple. So, like I've mentioned it a little bit, but I don't think I gave the details on it with John the Baptist and Jesus. John the Baptist dresses Jesus down as a coward because he won't stand up to Herod. Well, here's a couple of things that I know. John the Baptist said, when it comes to Jesus, there's one who comes after me whose sandal straps I am not worthy to loose. That's how John looked at Jesus. Jesus looks at John and says, among the prophets that God has given, there is none like John. But we know less about John than pretty much all the other prophets. So what was different about him? He's the one who was prophesied in Isaiah chapter 40 about the one who makes straight the way of the Lord. He was the forerunner. In his own words, he says that. I'm just here to present who Jesus is. He's the one that needs the attention. And as John said, I need to decrease that he may increase. Now that he's here, I'm the one who's been setting up the table for him, but now he's here. I'm stepping off and he needs to be elevated. That's the John and Jesus relationship that the Bible teaches. The garbage that I watched in the Chosen should have made people throw stuff at their television and never watch another episode. It was offensive when I watched.
Wow. That is, it's so offensive. It's terrible. It hurts our hearts. And I just pray out there that you've stayed to the end of this video and that you have, that God would soften your heart and bring this to your attention with the grace and the love in which I hope you received it was executed. We both care. We both love you out there and really would encourage you to go to the Bible, test everything, test every ideology, every concept, every practice, every person. Test these shows, test the movies. We've got to do it as Christians. Don't exchange the one truth of God, the Word of God, for anything else because of something that you may think, that you think it has salvation power. The gospel has the power of salvation. The real gospel, not a fake Jesus, and supporting it is dangerous. And please don't be fooled, like we said before, that the enemy does want to fool us. He wants to fool us, and he's got to, and I think especially for Christians, Pastor, that he's got to have to make it look extra good, extra possibly Christian, maybe even holy, maybe by using the Bible itself, the terms, the Bible, Jesus, the whole thing. So remember that you are still susceptible and vulnerable to the attacks of the evil one. So you've got to be on guard.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better.
Thank you so much.
Couldn't have said it better. Thank you.
I've so enjoyed this conversation and I appreciate your time. And guys, I've already welcomed Pastor Chris back to do a video with me about tattoos. Look forward to that in the future.
Yeah.
But for now, you can find Pastor Chris. What's your website again, Pastor? Your YouTube, I'm sorry.
The YouTube, if they just look at my name, Chris Quintana and Old Path Theology, you'll find it. That's the easiest way rather than having to put in addresses and all that other stuff.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again. And my friends out there, God bless you. And remember, share the gospel, the real gospel. Share the gospel today and your testimony because you have nothing to lose, but that person has everything to gain. Until next time, God bless you.